This week on the Coach2Scale podcast, I sit down with Keith Rabkin, CRO of PandaDoc, and the seasoned go-to-market leader with an impressive resume featuring leadership stints at Google, Adobe, and Johnson & Johnson. Keith's unique path to sales leadership without ever carrying a bag proves that tenacity and curiosity can still drive extraordinary results. He'll share his 2x3 coaching framework, tackle the pitfalls of Lone Ranger sales behavior, and explain why tough conversations that we don't want to have are the cornerstones of true customer centricity and solid coaching. Whether you're scaling a team or leading from the front, this episode is packed with actionable insights for modern sales leaders. Take a listen. Oh yeah, please let us know you're out there. Hit the subscribe button on YouTube, comment, like, and repost on LinkedIn. Let's go. Welcome to Coach2Scale, how modern leaders build coaching cultures. I'm your host, Matt Bonelli. Join me as we build a community of like-minded professionals who share the belief that effective coaching improves the performance of every team member. Our mission is to help leaders become better coaches. The Coach2Scale podcast is sponsored by Coachum, the world's first AI coaching execution platform that leverages evidence-based coaching to increase quota attainment. And with that, let's get started. Guest has amassed deep and broad-based go-to-market experience at iconic companies, Google, Johnson & Johnson, and Adobe. Currently, he's Chief Revenue Officer at PandaDoc. Keith Rabkin, welcome to Coach2Scale.
Thanks for having me, Matt. There is nothing that I would rather talk about than coaching and talent. So this is the perfect activity for my afternoon and time well spent.
Awesome. All right. We are aligned. So Keith, let's kick it right off with a Mythbuster type question. And the question's this. There's a lot of myths in this crazy business that you and I have been part of for a long time. What's one of those myths when it comes to coaching and leading salespeople that you believe is misguided, maybe even complete BS?
Yeah, I wonder if you've heard this one before, Matt. I don't think it's total BS, but I think it's maybe misguided, which is that the only thing sellers care about is making money.
Yeah.
And, I've heard that time and again, right? Coin operated. Just create the right incentive plan and then, the reps will figure out how to get there. And I think while there is truth, a lot of people want to be in this business to make a good living. There's a lot more. And I think salespeople in general have the same motivations that others do. They want advancement. They want recognition. They want to do a good job. I think a lot of sellers take particular pride in their craft. That's something that I've seen, certainly in the last 2 years at PandaDoc. We have a lot of sellers who they want to obviously beat quota and hit those accelerators, but they also want to set personal records. They want to do the best job they can for the company. And so I think as a coach, one of the things we have to do is make sure we're creating a system by which our reps can earn, but also dealing with more of these intangibles and identifying what is the one thing that makes my seller tick and how can I lean into that to drive performance for that rep and help them reach their goals.
Yeah, and I appreciate you sharing that. And yes, I have heard that time and time again. And like a lot of the myths, there is some truth to it. It's not 100% false, but I like what you said. It's misguided. But and I may have even said it years and years ago. What motivates you? Money. I want to make the most money. I probably said something stupid like that along the way. But here's a question, Keith, because I have heard this before, and because it's common, right? And that was the question. What advice would you give to that hiring manager when he or she asks an interview question to get at the heart of what motivates somebody? And that person on the, maybe newer in their career that wants to please, thinks saying making money is the right answer. So they say, making money is important. That's what motivates me. And you and I know that that's not really the case. What's the follow-up question to that?
Yeah, I would continue to dig. Like how is making money going to make you a better seller? Or what other traits do you have that's going to make you a better seller? Because that's going to start to uncover that underlying motivation. Or, what do you want to maybe great, that's amazing that you want to make money, but tell me about what you want to accomplish in the next month and how you're going to grow in this role. Because that growth, if you turn it to growth, It's less about the outcome and more about the path. And I think what we want to understand is what path are they on, and do they see themselves moving into? Because that's going to help us understand these inherent motivations.
Yeah, and those inherent motivations are really what makes the, what makes it all go, what makes, where the rubber meets the road, if you will. So we kind of hit on, hiring and some things that had very high level here. But Keith, when you think about your leadership playbook that you've developed over the years, is there a playbook or a framework you use with your leadership team to help better coach and lead your salespeople?
I like to think I'm really big on structure. So this is a really structured approach that will work for some managers, may not work for others. But I like to create a 2x3 matrix, and I may not actually tell people I'm creating this matrix, but I use it internally. And one of the columns is goals, and one of the columns is what do I need out of this team member. And the goals come from them, right? I'm asking them, what do you want to accomplish? And the what I need is great. I may have some development areas for this person, right? Maybe it's they need to be better at pipe gen. Maybe it's they need to be better at closing.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's they need to be better at driving cross-functional projects that actually have a bigger payoff for the entire organization. So those are my two columns. And then I have sort of 3 rows, which are like, what's the tactical? What are we going to work on in the next 3 to 6 months, next 1 to 2 quarters? And let's understand your goals and how you're going to accomplish them in the next quarter or two. And then let's understand how you're going to raise your performance in the areas that I'm thinking about for the next 1 to 2 quarters. And then you've got this middle bucket, which is all right, let's look out over the next 1 to 2 years, probably more 1.5 years. What will indicate success for you, and how do we get you there? Their goal may be to get promoted. Their goal may be to make it to P Club. Start to fill that out. And then my goals might be different too, based on my assessment of this person's talent, where I need them to get on their metrics. And then there's the long term, which is, what do you want to be when you grow up? 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, and how do I help you start to get there? And how does that fit in with my organizational plans, right? If I've got a great enterprise seller who's crushing it and continually beating quota and driving new highs for the business, I want to make sure this person stays. And I've got to figure out what are the motivators that then help this person continue to stick with my organization.
So when you talk about goals, and you said that's what the employee, that's what the rep provides, let's say. And then it's what you as the leader need from that person. And you said they might need to ask better questions in discovery, whatever it might be. If their goal, if I work for you and my goal is, let's say, to get promoted in the next 12 to 18 months, and you want me to be better, run better discovery calls, what about the skill that I might think I want to get better at? For example, negotiating. Does that skill that I think, is there any alignment where I have to self-assess that I need to get better at discovery too? Or are you saying, hey, listen, you may not have thought about this, but I have, and you need to get better at this?
Well, so this is the nuance, right? If you say to me, your goal is to get promoted, and your goal, you can have goals that are very tangible. I want to get promoted. Yeah. I want to make B Club. I want to, be the top rep. But then there's more amorphous goals. I want to be better in negotiation. I think one of your jobs as a coach or a manager is to make sure you can tease those apart and understand both of them. This box doesn't have to be one thing in each category. What I like to do, and I think one of the beauties of this matrix, is that if I can tie what's in my column to what's in their column, it's great. So if your goal is to get promoted, but my goal is for you to do better discovery, then I'm trying to tie them together and say, your best path to get promoted is when you get better at discovery, because that's going to help you continue to generate pipe, continue to make sure you close deals at a higher clip. And that's going to lead you to the outcome you want. It's not that I'm telling you no to being a better negotiator. It's just tying what I want you to do back to the goal that you're explicitly asking for.
Okay. No, that makes a ton of sense. And thanks for sharing that. Keith, one of the topics we talked about in our initial call together is that you pride yourself on being customer-centric and leading a team of folks that are customer-centric. We both know that's a huge buzzword and largely overused and misused. When you talk about customer centricity, what does that mean to you in terms of how you lead a team?
So I think there's maybe another myth with sellers, right?
There's
That
a few. Yeah.
is that sales is like it's a job for a lone wolf,
Mm.
right? Um, versus being part of a team. And I think this team aspect of selling really ties into customer centricity in a real way. When you're in sales, no matter if you're a new business seller, you're an SDR, or you're an expansion sales rep who's doing renewals and driving expansion, or you're a combined rep that's doing all of this. You're part of this like broader organization that has this goal of getting customers and keeping those customers and wanting those customers to come back for more. And I think when we approach from a standpoint of not being customer centric and just trying to get a sale no matter what, we're actually putting ourselves above the organization. And it ties into that lone wolf mentality, which may be okay for, hitting quota in a given quarter, but it's going to start to hurt you down the line, right? It's either your CSM team is going to start to get annoyed with you, your manager is going to realize their net dollar retention is suffering, your customers may get you a reputation, especially if you're in a small industry, or if you're an enterprise where there's just not that many companies out there. Like, people talk,
Yeah.
these things come back. And so the best sellers I've seen are the ones who continue to understand that this is a long game,
Yeah.
right? And I'm going to be around as a seller for 20 or 30 years. The customers I have at one company are going to be my customers in the next company. And the ones that I get to a really great outcome will come back to me for more. So we have a fantastic rep on my team today, and he's actually won many of his customers from his previous company because they trust him so much, which only comes from getting them to a great outcome. If he had said, hey, I'm going to close the maximum deal I can, I'm going to sell them stuff they don't need,
Right.
they're not going to come back to him because they realize like he's out for himself, not for this like mutually beneficial relationship.
Yeah.
And so I think that this pays increasing dividends over time, right? In terms of both the rep and the company.
Yeah, I really appreciate what you said about like no lone rangers, and one of a counterpart, in that another revenue leader in this business, Mike DeLoya. He was on the show not too long ago, and he commented. He said, if a rep comes to me and says, "Hey, I closed this big deal and I did it by myself," the first thing I'm going to say is why you left money on the table and you didn't help the customer as much as you could have. So I love the way our industry is focusing more on sales being a team sport, and that's a big part of being customer centric, and that there's no lone rangers. So
Totally agree. I mean, and I think sometimes it's hard to ask for help, but when you realize it's a team, and a lot of great sellers come from sports backgrounds, right? So there should be this natural inclination that you can get help, get your execs on a call, get your CSM in there, get your SE. I think the SE AE relationship usually works pretty well. But the more people you bring, I think there's some gong statistics that the more people on a call, the higher the close rate. So, it's in your best interest to do it, and it helps the customer get to that great outcome.
Yeah, I think it increases the close rate and it increases the deal size. Those are two good things that we all want more of,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
So, Keith, one of the topics that's come up, it comes up a lot, but recently this is something that we've been digging into and peeling back the onion on, is this whole notion of having difficult conversations. Tons of books written about it. The problem is not a new one. What are the folks that impress you the most, right? The most seasoned, successful sales leaders. How do they deal with having difficult conversations?
I would say that the best that I've worked with are very honest, but they don't and they don't hide. Like, they don't hide away from giving the bad news, but they give that bad news with compassion. And personally, I think this is one that took me a while to get used to, right? Like, I have this dread about having the hard conversation. Like, I don't want to have it. It's like, it sucks. It's painful. But I think over the years, what I realized is you're going to have this conversation one way or
Yeah.
another. So, it's like when you wake up in the morning and you're like, "Oh, I just want to lay in bed and I don't want to go to the gym." But like when you
Never
go to the
happens, by
gym,
the way.
right? Never. But like when you just do it, like you just go get it done. And when you get it done, everybody's in a better shape, right? Like you're not hiding, then you don't have to have a conversation later where the person who's getting maybe this tough news was like, well, why didn't you tell me this months ago? Like my behavior didn't change in this time. So it's like it's about being genuine, and it doesn't mean, like, I think one of the challenges too is we say like, well, when you're giving critical feedback, you're being harsh. Actually, you're not being harsh. Just lead with the facts. Like it's not that you're a bad seller. Your close rate is low. You did not generate enough pipe.
Yeah.
I need to see this different. It's not, that's nothing personal about you. This is, I have expectations for you and you didn't meet the expectations, but it's very honest. And then it's, I'm here to help you, but you do need to hit these marks. And I think the more you can be upfront about that, the better situation you're creating and the better opportunity you're creating for this person to make a decision on their own part about what they want to do with this feedback.
Yeah. Like most people, you mentioned that you don't love having these types of conversations. I mean, no one does, but they have to be had. Do you find, especially with all of the different data that's being aggregated and stored, do you see that the data sometimes helps have a more difficult conversation because you can point to the data as opposed to, coming off as like, here's how I feel about you?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, grounded in the facts. Because if it's a feeling based conversation, like that's where it gets hard because now it's how you feel about me as the person getting the feedback versus this is my expectation of anybody in this role. You have to generate this pipe. You have to close this much. That you treat customers with respect, right? Like if you're mean or you're mean to teammates, like I have received X number of complaints or negative pieces of feedback.
Mm.
That has nothing to do with how I feel about you. I might absolutely love you as a person. We might have the best time like working together. But this is the expectation of the role. And I think that makes it really easy for somebody to understand.
Yeah.
Again, they may not like that feedback, but it is very factual, which at least allows them to internalize it and absorb it much more easily.
Okay. And that segues into a question I have about, lessons learned, right? Painful lessons. You've been doing this a while. My guess is that it's not all rosy sunshine and rainbows. Is there a painful lesson in this business that kind of shaped how you approach leading teams today? Maybe an aha moment, if you will?
I think if you ask my team one characteristic about me, they would say urgency. I have an extreme level of urgency. So I don't like waiting for things to happen. But my lesson is that change always takes longer than you expect. And, so what do you do about that? You start planning ahead more and you start thinking about things you can do in advance and you signal to people who are doing a great job. You signal to the organization about the direction the organization is moving. And when you have critical feedback, you share it early because the longer you sit on it, the longer that change is going to take. And so that's probably the biggest lesson. I mean, that's one of the things that drove me the craziest. When I started here at PandaDoc, we had a very transactional sale. We were pretty far down market. We just closed. And one of the changes we made was to introduce value selling. And I was like, oh, this isn't going to be hard. I have really smart reps. I mean, I have a great team of AEs and AMs. I was like, this is going to be easy. Like they're super smart. They know this product inside and out. But changing that behavior just took a really long time. And it just surprised me. So repetition, planning ahead, and continuing to like draw that roadmap of where you're going is the best thing you can do to make sure you're bracing for that change that will take longer than you want it to.
Yeah, nobody loves change. Some people it's easier than others. And I remember a book written, it was a while back now, by some folks out in the Bay Area, I believe, Chip and Dan Heath. They wrote a book called Switch: How to Change When Change is Hard. And they talked about the repetition and shrinking the change. And it's just just a super important book about like how change always takes longer than you expect. And so, but then again, the other adage in our business is the only thing constant is change, right? So
Yep, absolutely.
so I guess when you were like, I mean, I'm curious when you're focusing on value selling, right? When you rolled it out, you have smart reps, right? You know, they get it. It's not intellectual that's going to knock them for a loop here. It's, I guess maybe it's comfort zone, things like that. What are what were some of the things, I guess, more specific that you did to hang in the pocket there and make sure that it wasn't treated as, oh, this is the flavor of the month. This too shall pass.
So there's quite a few things, start with great enablement. You've got to have an amazing enablement team. And I think most sales leaders love their enablement team. And I'm no exception. My team is fantastic. But you start with that as a basis to make sure they're grounded and they know what they're trying to get to. And then the second thing, back to team sport, is my managers, right? I want my managers constantly reinforcing this. And they're going to be meeting with the reps all the time. So the more that they're telling them this, the more it's going to be top of mind. I think the challenge really is what you said, which is it's comfort zone. Like, yes, I get this. I know this is going to lead to better results. But in a moment when I'm on a call and I go into a Zoom meeting every single day in my job, I just go back to what I know. Right. And so like you've really got to get them way past that point of change. So the team, the enablement, and then like beat the drum. My VP of sales staff is amazing at doing this. Like constantly, every all hands we have, we're beating the same drum of like, these are our priorities. Here's why this matters. And it's not just the what,
The
it's
why.
the why.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think continuing to match those two things with great enablement and great management leads to these better results.
And I love that you brought up the other leg to the stool, and enablement, because if you don't have a strong enablement team, it's hard to make anything stick moving forward, as we both know. So one of the things you shared with me before in our initial conversation was that you come from a non-traditional background. You've worked at some great companies, Stanford, Wharton, great education, but you didn't carry the bag. And some would say, "Oh, why am I going to listen to this guy? He's never carried the bag." And some would say, "Hey, it's a superpower. Sometimes it might be better not to know, right?" You can find people who say both, but let me focus on the former one. What do you say to those critics who might say, Keith never carried the bag?
What I would say is you've got to study. You got to study to be good at anything. And hard work is the number one differentiator. Like how many people hire sales reps based on what college they went to? I think very few. I think people want to see reps who put in the work and are good at their job. And I would say the same thing about me. Like, don't hire me because of my, education pedigree or the companies I work for, but hire me because I put in the hard work, and trust me as a revenue leader because I put in the hard work. No one's watched more gong calls than I have. No one is reading more articles. Well, maybe Steph, my VP of sales, is, but I think those are the things, right? And my way of selling is going to be different than the CRO who grew up carrying a bag for 20 years. But I also know where I'm not good, right? Don't call me in to go sell to GE. Like I'm not going to do a good job there. Like I'm going to be okay. But if you want a CRO who's going to be like really personal in a call and be customer centric, which I think more and more buyers are looking for, our expectations as software buyers has been raised, in particular, as we expect technology that behaves in the business like it is in the consumer world. We want a customer centric buying process. And when I get on calls, there's this level of authenticity and honesty that comes across that I do hope helps us win deals. And so I think that's a big piece of it. And then, I think my team would say, Keith's really done a good job of raising performance because he has been a student of the game and he looks at data all the time. I think that's the piece, right? This understand and I work hard to look at the data to say, I see this trend. The reps that are top performing do these things consistently. And that leads to better outcomes for these sellers.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate and I enjoyed the answer. It's kind of funny because you always get people who say so and so didn't do that particular job. Like, why? They don't have any street cred. And as a sports fan, I'm a Boston guy. Mike, I don't think Bill Belichick was, he certainly wasn't a pro football player. And I don't even think he played football at a high level. And that's the case with most professional teams. Many of them weren't players, and they certainly weren't great players. But I really like the answer. It's like you put in the work, and you put in the work.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, one other point, so I worked at Google back in its heyday, right, when a lot of the great products were being introduced. Google Docs, which now, I mean, that's what I use in my job. That's what I used in my last job. Like, it has become a mainstay of what we do. They introduced, Google Cloud. They introduced Chrome, the browser, all these YouTube. They bought YouTube and they turned it into this juggernaut. Back when I was there, we did not hire based on the resume. We were encouraged to look past the resume and the job on the resume and to hire for aptitude. And for me, that is a lesson that I take with me. Like, yes, there are some jobs where experience is a good signal that somebody knows how to do something. But great interviewers will test for aptitude and use that aptitude score to make the hire. I would much rather hire a sales rep who is showing aptitude, who is at a non-name brand company, than a sales rep who, doesn't work as hard, doesn't show insane levels of curiosity, but worked at one of the top SaaS companies. Right. It's a very easy choice for me.
Yeah. One of the you talk about curiosity. One of the favorite interview questions that I stole from someone else along the way to kind of get at, is someone really driven? Are they ambitious? Are they curious? But if someone comes in with, I don't know, let's call it 15 years of experience, this person says, I want to get to understand, does this person have 15 years of experience compounded, or do they have 1 year of experience 15 times? And
that's a great.
And they really try to figure out, like, are they curious? Are they ambitious? Are they driven? So you talked about Google, or as my father-in-law would say, the Google. Put it into the Google. You talked about Google. You talked about technology. AI is all the rave these days. What are and if anything comes to mind, what are the salespeople or sales leaders? How are they the best ones right now leveraging AI to be not more efficient, more effective?
I think we're just in the beginning stages, right? And as much as there are great tools out there, I do think the people who are leading now have a, just as good shot of being completely irrelevant in 3 years from a technology perspective. It's changing so quickly. So for me, the best thing companies can do and individuals is to experiment. And it goes back to what we were just talking about, curiosity. The rep who is playing around with these technologies, and I don't need to name names, they're all there's tons of them out there. There's new ones coming up every day. The ones who are playing with it and figuring out what works are going to be the most successful because they're going to find what works for them. And that may be different depending on your segment. It may be different depending on your motion. Are you inbound, outbound? Are you channel driven? These are all going to create different permutations that different tools will serve at different levels. And so experimenting and trying things out, to me, is the best path. That's kind of what we're doing now. We actually have been playing around with about 7 different tools to see which ones we want to bank on, which ones match PandaDoc style, which ones help our sales reps be more effective and actually turn into the end result. It's very easy to say, this will make me more efficient, right? Oh, it writes my cadence for me. Great. Did it actually result in an opportunity? How good is the pipe? Does it close at a different rate? Same thing with intent data that's out there. Combining those makes me more efficient too, because now I don't even have to go do research. But does that actually make me better when I get on the call with the customer and I haven't done any research? No. So I think a lot of it will be customized and depend. And a lot of this is still changing so rapidly. So my advice is play around a lot, get different team members to try different things, share those learnings, and then start to make some bets.
Yeah. No, I love the idea of sharing the learnings. So, Keith, you're over at PandaDoc, you're chief revenue officer there. For those who don't know what PandaDoc is, can you say what the company does, and then also what do you love most about working there?
Yeah, so PandaDoc is a single solution for all your agreements. And for sellers, that's super important because you send out sales agreements for signature. Um, I cringe every time I see on LinkedIn at the end of the month somebody says, "Oh, we got our DocuSign back," because they're a competitor. What we have is a lot better for sellers for several reasons. One, we give you better analytics on people who view your agreement. So today, I'm talking about AI tools. We've got a PDF that was sent over by one of these vendors, and this vendor charges around $200,000 a year. So this is a pretty solid sale. This PDF's getting passed around like no tomorrow. And we're like, I'm reviewing it. My head of marketing is reviewing it. My VP of sales is looking at it. Like, these are great buying signals. Now, because it's a PDF, this team has no idea that we're looking at this, which leads to two things. One, they don't know how warm of a buyer we are,
Right.
which means they can't forecast accurately whether we're going to close or not. And two, when I go back and negotiate, I'm going to play it cool, right? I'm going to say, we're looking at 5 different vendors and, you guys are just as good as the other. But if they could go in and see how often I was personally logging into this thing and seeing, that's an incredible signal. So that's one way that we're different. Another is we actually make the branding really unique on these proposals. How often do you get like an order form that's just like this kind of boring quote and then put your signature?
Right.
Ideally, your company has assets that they can put in front. Here's how many years of experience. Here's a case study, and then the order. We bundle that all up. And probably most importantly to sellers, we save you time. We actually prevent a lot of that back and forth with Deal Desk that sellers just hate working
Oh,
with.
yeah.
And so that value proposition makes us a really great sales tool.
Awesome. And so what do you love about working with the team?
The people at this company are amazing. We've got a global workforce, employees from Ukraine, Portugal, all over the US. We're fully remote. And we've just done this amazing job of bringing people together that have this goal of serving customers. PandaDoc was founded as a company that was here to help small and medium businesses succeed with by giving them a tool that was disproportionately powerful relative to what larger companies had. And so this mission of helping companies be more productive, close deals faster is core to our being, and we talk about it a lot. And my team is here to do the right thing for the customer. A lot of my sales reps will tell me, they're like, Keith, I didn't close this deal. And I'm like, why didn't you close this deal? And they're like, this wasn't the right solution for this customer. And as much as I want that sale, at the end of the day, I also run CX. So I'm like, okay, you made the right call because I don't want this customer to churn out in 6 months. And I don't want this rep to get a claw back in 3 months when it's the wrong thing. So we're all in it together. We go to the right things. And it's a fun environment. I mean, it's not always easy, right? We're coming from behind against some pretty large competitors, but the elegance of our tool, the great teamwork, and the focus on doing what's right for our customer, I think makes it well worth getting up every morning.
So, Keith, if somebody out there listening says, wow, you know what, we've been evaluating, or we need to evaluate something, and we're interested, and sound like PandaDoc sounds like it could be a good fit, and or someone says, wow, it sounds like a great company, I want to work there, where can someone learn more?
PandaDoc.com. We've got a very easy to find demo request form, which should make it very easy to get in front of a seller. And that is the best way to get into our pipeline and learn about the product. The websites, we've done a really good job of making it accessible to understand what we do. There's some videos, there's some graphics, there's comparisons against other tools. And then, we are constantly hiring. So our career site is on the website as well.
All right, constantly hiring. There, I'm sure a lot of people might like to hear that. So, Keith, the podcast is Coach2Scale. We bring people on who have a point of view and who give a crap about coaching and developing other people. people who care about that, like yourself, usually have had that behavior modeled for them somewhere along the way. Can you tell us about someone whose coaching has had an impact on your career and your leadership style?
Yeah, I've had three fantastic coaches, maybe three and a half. But the one who was most recent was my executive vice president at Adobe, Brian Lampkin, who's just an amazing human being. And again, really customer focused, very aspirational, like constantly challenging us to do better. And I can remember a couple of times he really lit into me, but did it in a way where he's like hard, but then like pulled me up at the end. And I think a lot of sellers and go to market people in general appreciate that, which is this, I like, I'm being hard on you because I know you can do this,
Right.
and I want to challenge you to do better. So, Brian helped me get into go to market, again, took a little bit of a chance on me because I was coming from more of an operational background, and really appreciate what he taught me.
Awesome.
And I think I'm much better for that, like really pushing hard and then pulling people back up. And then that continuing to be customer focused, which a lot of my mentors have done for me.
Awesome. Well, yeah. I mean, whenever you describe someone that you worked for in this crazy business as an amazing human being, the shout out to Brian for that. I'm sure have you ever told him that?
I don't know if I've ever told him
All right.
that.
Well, again,
I think he knows I
just,
appreciate him, but I don't know if I've ever said that.
all right.
So I should.
So people love hearing that stuff. So the who's your favorite coach? So think of it a little differently. Maybe a name a lot of people would know. It doesn't have to be sports, but a lot of sometimes sports comes to mind. Who's your favorite coach out there, and why? What attribute?
So I've got two maybe, and kind of similar in some ways, very different in other
All
ways.
right.
So I'll start with the first. I went to Stanford. I went to Stanford when we went to the Final Four, and I was a huge basketball junkie. Mike Montgomery was the coach, and he put up a really good run in a very challenging
Yeah.
environment at Stanford. I think what he did well was he recruited well, and Stanford had really hard guardrails around recruiting
Yeah.
there. Did a great job there. Great X's and O's coach, in some very tight games would just like pull out wins that, I remember we beat Duke like I think 2 years in a row, and it was just like, what? How's that even
Yeah.
possible? There's just no way this happened. And he did it through like great coaching because we had great players, but they had like a ridiculous roster. So I think, I love that about him. And the X's and O's is kind of like, that's how I think of myself as a CRO. Again, I'm not a salesperson. I'm more of like, let me look at the data and figure out the plays we need to run.
Mm-hmm.
That would be like my back in the day answer. My today answer is Steve Kerr. I'm in the Bay Area, Warriors. I gotta love them. And like, how can you go wrong? He's got this amazing team, but so got great talent, recruited great talent. But then again, back to the X's and O's, he finds a way to maximize the talent. Or I think the other piece about him that's maybe different is he finds a way past obstacles. So grit. Curry goes down with an injury and somehow they still win, right? Because he's figuring things out. And I think any good leader is going to continue to find obstacles. Any good coach is going to have obstacles, yeah. Right? People plateau at different times. People have life changes, right? Whether it's getting married or, God forbid, illness or a pregnancy, but good coaches find ways to solve through those problems and help maximize the potential of their team. So those would be my two.
Great player, great coach, great results. It's hard to argue with Steve Kerr, except I'm a Boston guy and I don't like what he did to Jason Tatum. I don't understand it, but topic for another day. Last question, Keith. Just have a little fun with it. If you had to give a TED Talk tomorrow about one topic to a huge group, right? TED Talk style, what would the topic be and why?
So one person who worked for me said that he's never experienced more growth than when I managed him directly. And we would talk about how he experienced this. And he would say, a couple of people who've worked for me have had this. And I think as I've sort of dissected what that is more, and it doesn't work for everybody, but it is almost this sink or swim viewpoint on new talent. And one of the things I do, which again, you have to hire the right kind of person for this to work, is I give them all the pressure. I'm like, here's everything you've got to do and go get it. And I'm here to help you, but like, I'm going to keep giving you more until you tell me uncle. Like when you tell me to stop, I will pull back. And I'm just going to give it to you. But through these experiences, like I think of like the term forged in a crucible, like that crucible of the pressure, it's either going to cause somebody to drop out, which is why this is not the right approach for everybody, or it's going to challenge them to reach new heights. And for me, and the way I hire and the way I manage, I've gotten really good results out of that. So I would probably talk about that and, how you match the hiring with people who succeed in that coaching style. And maybe your follow-up question is going to be, how do you hire the right people? You hire people who like challenges, you hire people who are curious, and you hire people who have a tenacity to want to go and overcome obstacles, because like they don't want to give up when you're putting this on them. Like eventually everybody, even the most tenacious people I've hired, are like, okay, this is enough. Like, please stop. At which point, like we load balance and we figure things out. But it just produces so much growth with people.
Well, I love the connection. You're right. It does segue into about hiring. And if you hire the right people, you can do things like that. One of the big programs in Marine Corps leadership training, they actually call it the crucible. And one of the principles within the crucible is to give the students, the aspiring Marine leaders, absolutely much more than they could possibly accomplish in the allotted amount of time. They can't do it. They can't do it all. So they have to think, they have to prioritize, they have to maintain even keel, they have to ask questions. But in order to do that, you have to bring certain ingredients to the table, which means you have to have the right recruiting process. And so, thanks for sharing that. I loved it. Keith, we covered a lot of ground. We talked about the crucible. We talked about hiring. We talked about having difficult conversations, customer centricity. Really appreciate everything you brought to the table today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. Like, there's very few things I like talking about more than talent and getting people to great results. So I appreciate you having me on.
Well, likewise, and it was obvious that you like talking about it. And I noticed on LinkedIn, there was somebody fairly recently wrote a review for you. And, they just talked about how you help them and you care about them. And that's why they followed you from company to company. And that's a huge vote of confidence for any leader.
That's the person I was talking about, who is the one who is like, you've challenged me so much. And I guess he kept coming back for more challenges, but I've tried to get him over here to PandaDoc, but he's resisting.
All right. I missed that. I thought he was there, but still he followed you to multiple companies. So that's a huge testament to your leadership. Keith, thank you very much. And also thanks to everyone out there watching and listening. Appreciate you being there. If you liked what we're bringing, let us know what you'd like, but also more importantly, let us know what you'd like to see and hear more of. We want to bring guests that are interesting and informative and provide practical and action-oriented advice that helps make your very difficult job a little bit easier. So thanks for tuning in, and until next time, coach them if you want to keep them. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Coach2Scale, How Modern Leaders Build Coaching Cultures. For show notes and other episodes, visit us at coachem.io. That's COACHEM.io. And follow us on Twitter at CoachemNow. See you all next week. Thanks for joining. And remember, coach them if you want to keep them.